Biggest warning is this: that if you're backstage, your on stage performance, your backstage life stays separate. When you die, that'll be one of your biggest regrets. I've sat with people, like I've literally sat in rooms where people die. Was I who I was designed to be? And did I bring that to the world? A lot of times we have this completely different persona, and then we have this backstage reality. And a lot of times the backstage reality is actually a lot of who we are.
What do you feel like is the biggest difference between your on-stage versus off-stage presence?
Hey, what's up, guys? Want to welcome you back to another episode of the New Rules Podcast. It is your boy, Adrian here, and I am joined, like I always am, by the one, the only, the illustrious, Miss Brianna Clark.
Keep them coming.
Oh, my God. Bri, what's happening?
Not much.
Man, another episode right here in Picked.
Shout out Picked.
Shout out Picked.
Can we just take a moment of silence for this beautiful, I almost said background of dad shoes?
Dude, they are big. My guys at Pick TLH, they keep me up to date. What's interesting about it is these guys, they again, you want to follow them on Instagram, Pick TLH, local business here in Tallahassee. Vintage clothes, shoes, vibes are incredible. And so they were very kind to let us come in and film today. But they keep me up to date. So I'm a Jordan 1 type of guy, but Matt Hall, who works at Pick, he always is telling me, man, no, you got to get on the New Balance, kind of wave runner type thing. I was like, dude, if you guys rock that, you're younger, you look cool, you look hip. I do it, I look like a dad. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's not, like, it doesn't work for me, I feel like, but.
You got to put on some blue jeans.
Yeah.
Like a gray, raggedy t-shirt.
That's what I'm saying. I feel like with a dad, like, it's funny. Anybody that's seen me rock the shoes, right? It's so, those who are like my age, a little bit older, they'll see, they're like, oh, you're normally wearing cool shoes. Oh, you're becoming like us, like a dad. But then younger people will see me with them. They're like, I like those a lot. So it's just kind of this weird kind of dilemma that I'm in sometimes. Like, I wore a pair, I don't know what day I wore it somewhere, and my friends and my wife were like, why are you wearing those dad shoes? But there's like everyone who was younger came was like, yo, I love those. So guys at Pick, they keep me up to date. I really appreciate them. So Bri, I'm excited today. Again, we're jumping to a lot of different stuff. And if you are new to the pod, we are glad that you're here. We really just exist to help people write new rules that are space and place they find themselves. And we believe the way that you write new rules is by being authentic. And we believe that authenticity really unlocks human flourishing. So our heart and job is to really help people become authentic leaders. Authentic leaders create credible cultures that really do impact and change the world. And so we just want to create that movement of just authenticity. And that we define authenticity as self-awareness and the resilience to remain self-aware. And so, and again, when you start to realize that you got to write new rules in order to become self-aware, and we believe in the world that's coming up, that authentic leadership, that is the key to really leading in the 21st century. We're living in a gray zone. We're living in a time where the game, the rules have changed. We don't even know what they're going to be, but authenticity, we believe, actually should lead that. So that's why we're here. So no matter where you find yourself, again, we're so glad that you happen to be a part and be a part of our family. Make sure you do me a favor. If you're not subscribed to our YouTube channel, you can actually go to Adrian Crawford, go to my personal YouTube, all the videos, things like that. We want to create a buzz, keep building up that, share with anybody you think, LinkedIn, wherever you find yourself, to do that. So, man, with that being said, Bri, I got a question for you as we dive in, because we did the draft, we've done the drafts, whatever, then we put it up on Instagram. You won the first draft. I blew you out in the second draft, out of the water. Wasn't even a contest, right? Mm-hmm. First one, it was close. It was a fight, but talent rose up on the second one, which was me, the talented one, and I blew you out the water. So that's how it should have been. People gave you the courtesy win, the first one, and they gave the real win to me. Would you agree with that?
Isn't he so humble? Isn't he just so encouraging? Like this, when I think of authentic leader, I think of everything you just said to me and how encouraging you were, how much you lifted me up and developed me to do well in our exercise together.
Gotcha. All right. Well, with all that being said, let me ask you a question. We've talked about movies, but if you really did have to pick just a movie, you're on an island, And I'm gonna pick one or two, but you like these are the only movies you can have. Like, what would those two movies maybe be? One or two?
The first two movies that come to mind: The Devil Wears Prada,
Yeah,
Princess Diaries.
definitely rock with you on the first one. Thought the second one was, I think, it's probably more of a time and place.
Yeah, you won't get it.
Yeah, I
You
won't get it.
Yeah.
I'm old.
Yeah. That's just
Got it. No, okay. Those are two good ones. Why?
They're very feel good.
Mm-hmm.
But also, you can get some story from them.
Yeah, for sure.
So, yeah, I don't know. I like the fashion and Princess Diaries.
Okay.
Love the plot. It just feel like if I was on an island, I'm thinking, what's gonna make me feel at home?
Yeah, nice.
I would choose those two movies.
Is Anne Hathaway in both, right?
She is.
Dude, you are.
That's why she's on top of my mind right now. Like, oh my
man,
gosh.
Cannes Film. Was it Cannes Film Festival?
Cannes Film Festival. I think. Is it pronounced Cannes or Cannes?
It's Cannes.
I don't know.
I think it's
French,
It's
so
Cannes
I
Film
have no
Festival.
idea.
So.
But oh my gosh, and the Met Gala.
Yeah, she did slay
she's
that.
with
She did.
Versace right now. Versace, however you want to say
I
it
don't
with the
call it
accent.
Versace. Every time I hear that,
Versace.
hey, every time I hear that, all I'm thinking Versace.
Amigos.
I know. All right, man.
Anyways, yes, love everything that she's been doing with them. It looks incredible. She has a comeback. I'm thinking they're going to do a Princess Diaries 3.
Wow.
I think that's why this is what, PR does. They get you out there. She's kind of dressing the part in these beautiful gowns.
Yep.
There's been some word for it. So this is this is their way of starting to plant excitement in our minds without really telling us they're doing that.
Yeah. Oh, good. Good. I think for me, if I had two movies, I'd probably go two movies on an island. I don't know. I always think about that because I'm like, man, do I want to laugh? Do you want to kind of like think? I think for me, if I'm sitting if I'm on a strand, if I'm a deserted island, whatever, I probably want to laugh. You know what I mean? Something keep me up a bit. So I think I'll probably go with two comedy. I probably would go with Money Talks with Chris Tucker. And the second one would go with the sweatshirt I got on. If you watch on YouTube, would be Trading Places with Dan Aykroyd and the great Eddie Murphy. Again, this movie was one of the most iconic movies. Probably the first 45 minutes of this movie, probably 90% of it. You know how weird I am. I could 90% quote the first 45 minutes of this movie. It is just, I've watched this movie 100 times. It is just, I can't, even today when I listen to it, I just watched their podcast with Bill Simmons, The Rewatchables, where they went through the whole movie. And I'm talking about, I was in the steam room listening to it, and I'm talking about, it's just me and another person in the steam room, and I'm listening to it in my earpods, and all of a sudden I start just laughing so hard. I know they probably,
I thought you were going to say you started like saying the words out loud. I was like, oh my gosh, as much as you talk about these people in the steam
I know,
room,
I was
you're being that person.
No, I did. So, but no, I love that movie. And so, again, I think if I'm on an island, I definitely want to laugh. You know what I mean? Keep me from crying. Being on a deserted island. You know what I mean? And so, man, with that being said, man, let's jump into the pod today.
All right. So, can you share a little bit about the topic we're going to discuss today?
Yeah, the topic today is actually called Clear the Stage. The last two pods, one before, I was motivated by a quote by Parker J. Palmer. And I'm actually reading another book by Parker J. Palmer. Again, he's just this guy that, in certain circles, people know who he is, but he isn't wide known. But he talks on the idea so much of like purpose in life, and the idea of actually what does that mean. A lot of the stuff I do in authenticity and work really was he was a guy who spoke to some deeper things in my heart in such an eloquent way with his book Let Your Life Speak. And now he has a book it's come out years ago, but it's called The Undivided Life, about really living a life of wholeness. And then he has this thing that he talks about, and I think this is so important, continuing to talk about authentic leadership, leading in that type of way, as he talks about the idea of your on-stage performance, versus the backstage reality, and how we all have an on-stage performance, but then we have the actual backstage reality of our lives. And the whole thing is that where I've kind of added to this is that I think you have to clear the stage. I believe that there are going to be things for the most part where you want to bring out that your on stage performance and your backstage reality should line up as much as humanly possible. I think that a lot of times we have this completely different persona, and then we have this backstage reality. And a lot of times the backstage reality is actually a lot of who we are. And it's the idea of how do you actually clear the stage in order to do that.
Okay, so first question. Do you have, or can you share, two core memories? One of them being a memory that really shaped all of the ways that you now decide to hide. So one that's a little bit more shadow side that helped develop that. And then second, can you share a core memory that kind of encouraged you and taught you that you can be yourself?
Yeah, it's actually good. Dang, you're starting off in the deep end of the day of the pool, man. We're just dropping right in. Childhood trauma. Let's get it. All right. So I got one, and it's not like probably not one, but it's dealing with a specific kind of thing. Playing basketball. I wasn't the smartest guy. I mean, I struggled in school. I've talked about that before. Like, school was so hard for me. We didn't have the diagnosis, the tools, all the research that we have now with ADHD and all the other type of kind of learning disabilities that are out there. I learned this later in life of kind of some of the learning disabilities I actually had. So school was really tough. So basketball, and I was an emotional kid, some people probably look at me younger as a soft kid because I was super thin, always cried. And so I'm in this tough city of Akron. And the one thing, though, that made me feel like a superhero, where I wasn't like below average, was basketball. And so what I learned was performance. That, man, like, if I perform, I am loved. And so the reason why that goes to the core memory of the idea of covering up is that it became where in my life, it became about performance. That I've got to perform at a high level, because when I do that, people applaud you. I feel good about myself. You have girls who like you. You have more friends. All the stuff happened because of that. And so what I had to always create was I was always on. I was always had to be on. You always had to perform. And so I think that created that kind of thing in me as far as where I would hide, because there'd be times where I'm like, I didn't want to perform. I had no desire to perform. And I was really hurting. And so I would kind of cover that up. On the other side, it was, I'm 44. I was like 33, I think. And it was with my therapist, my former therapist, Dr. Mike Zoda, who hopefully we'll be having him on the pod soon enough. But, when I sat with Doc, and this may have been like session 3 or 4. And Doc, he's just been doing it forever, worked with some of the highest level people. And he just told me, he was like, your problem is you don't understand your level of your EQ. He was like, it's actually one of the top 2 or 3 people I've ever been around in my life. He's like, it's a superpower. And so the thing I thought was always like wrong, thing I thought that wasn't like a gift, was actually my superpower. And so what that led to was that the freedom to realize, I have a gift that I can give to the world. My emotions, healthy under the right way, processed properly, are actually a superpower. And that gave me so much freedom to actually, I think, a lot of the work and a lot of stuff that I do now.
For the story that you told, the first one that you shared, can you just share a little bit about how that impacts you today?
Yeah, I think that because of, when you live in life where your only thing you ever found that you did well was this thing, and that's how you got actually acceptance into the world. You got acceptance to the world, you got acceptance to society, you got people who like you. For me, it led to my education being paid for. It led to the fact of you had, thousands of people cheering for you. It led to my professional career, all that. And so you just end up living in performance. And so what that can do is that if you're not careful, your whole life will just then be about what applause, what rewards, what am I getting? And I can do that in almost in every part of my life. So all of a sudden, instead of, as a parent, instead of actually doing what's right by helping them, it could be, how do I get praise and reward for them? For my kids, instead of me actually, sometimes they're just gonna be pissed off at me because I got to just make a tough decision because they did something stupid. Or the fact of with my wife, again, we're gonna be married coming up here on 22 years, and it's like there's still times where I do things to actually that just it's So I want her to be okay and happy, even though I may feel I need to say this or do this because this is the best thing to do. And so it just ends up being such a part. Here's the best thing. It becomes such a part of your identity. The crazy thing about living in this country is because I love it, but it's up and to the right. It's, you work hard, capitalistic society. And so what happens? Performance becomes a part of your identity. So what happens though when you don't perform? Part of your identity, part of who you are starts to die. You feel like you're dying because that's why when I stopped playing basketball, it was literally like somebody died to me because it was such a part of my identity. And it was basketball. Yeah, I loved it and missed it. But more than anything else, I think I realized I miss what it did for me. I miss the praise of it. I miss how people would respond and treat me. And that was a real hard thing when you go from those things. And so I think it still to this day impacts me.
Can you share a little bit about some of the ambivalence there, though? Because I feel like sometimes, even though it sounds a little bit crazy, people might realize that they're doing something out of performance or wanting to be accepted. And maybe that thing isn't a bad thing, but they just stop doing it. Like, I'm just going to stop playing basketball because I'm realizing that I'm doing it because I want to be loved. And there's a little bit of a tension there. Yeah.
I think that, and I did that. I was like, for a long time, I just, even though I went into basketball skill training, my intuition got me through that part because I realized I had a skill set that I'd learned for over, at that point in time, 20 some odd years of my life. And I actually, kind of being a futurist, I saw where this was way before basketball skill training or skill training was a thing. So I saw where the world was going. And so I actually used my skill to do that, to build a business and sell it. Now in that though, I think when I would talk and communicate, I wouldn't like to use basketball examples because for so long how it had such this impact in me, I could see it as such a negative thing. And as I look back now, it's just one of those things to where it's not that basketball or that was bad, or it was just what it did for me. Anytime you take the created and the created becomes the thing like you actually worship, it becomes the thing that it's going to bring you to your utopian world or whatever, that thing falls. It always falters. It's never perfect. That ball will stop bouncing. I'm watching, as we're recording this, LeBron James just ended his 20th year, you know what I mean? And in him ending his 20th year, like he's besides Michael Jordan, in my opinion, the best to ever do it. And it's still, Father Time's catching up with him. So at some point in time, the creative stops. So I think there's some ambivalence in all this stuff because it's like it can have a negative impact, but it also, I look at basketball. Where I'm at, what we're doing, it was because of that. You know what I'm saying? It was used as a tool to get me to where I'm at now. So I think there is definitely that ambivalence that's there.
Do you feel like there is a difference between acceptance and love? Because sometimes we can say, my parents love me no matter what. I love you no matter what. And I think in some level that might be true depending on your experience. But speaking for myself, maybe you could say this too. When I do what my parents want me to do, they are more accepting of me, to be honest. So, and I feel like that can happen in a variety of different relationships. So is there a difference there?
Yeah, I think so. The idea of love, acceptance, reward, praise. I think that you have to be careful when you say like, hey, they love me more. It may be more like reward, more like, praise, accolades, whatever, when you do that. But there are also people, they love you less. And here's the thing, love is it's action, right? Like love is an action thing. And so all of a sudden you stop doing what you do and then people stop rocking with you. They literally treat you different. They start, before when you're up and to the right, they got a lot of patience with you, they got a lot of patience because that's one thing that happens, right? Because it makes them feel good too, because let's be real. They can go talk to their friends or their whatever about, look at what my daughter did. They could post it on, if they're a boomer, they could post it on Facebook or Gen X, or, they put it on Instagram, their story or whatever. Oh my God, look at what my kid did. And it makes them feel good about themselves. And so that's where they find that. And I see it a ton. I see it a ton with people where they live so much through actually the actions of their kids. And so I think love and reward are kind of different things. I think love is actually something that constantly stays there. If they back out from with you, I think their love has changed. But I think maybe they may not applaud you or praise you as much as that. And I think that was one of the things that I do appreciate a lot about my dad, was that he always used to make me do this, and I hated it, but he made me do this. Whenever I would always want to know critical feedback for how I played, him being a coach, and he would never let us start the conversation like that. He would always make me tell me 2 or 3 things you felt like you did well, and I'm going to tell you 3 things I felt like you did well. Then he would get me into critical feedback.
What do you feel like is the biggest difference between your on-stage versus off-stage presence?
I think that what I'm learning, and I had to learn this a lot through like therapy, is that, you know, people don't want to admit this in our world today because we live in such a hyper polarized world. And if you bring up race or you say anything like that, everybody goes to whatever place. But there is a difference being black and being a black man that happened, because what I realized, not even knowing, a lot of who I was, I would pull off stage, because if I felt like I was taught, you have to be twice as good as everyone else. When you come into a room, you have to be non-threatening. And so when all that stuff would go on and I would come into a room, I found myself being a certain way. I found myself like backing up. I found myself like not even knowing that I wasn't fully being me. So at times I'm not fully who I really am supposed to be, because I'm trying not to be threatening to people. I'm trying not to be, remember my childhood, I'm trying not to be too much for people. And it's not like consciously, it's just in my subconscious. And I'm constantly having to build myself to when I walk into a world like, no, you fully have to show up. So when I go in places, I literally have to tell myself, do not show up. I mean, do not not show up. Fully show up in here, because fully you is going to be the best version, is going to get the best results. But a lot of that stuff is subconscious that I've constantly had to unwrap inside of me. I try not to be that much. I don't want to be that much, because if I'm that much, then that means that's a threat, or it's not good enough. Or if I'm, you know, again, in my marriage, for example, right? Like feeling like I'm not enough in all parts of my life. So of course, with the person who I love the most, I feel like, man, am I enough for her? So then at times I back up. I don't show up fully that I need to show up, because if I do, what would that look like? Even though I know Wendy's fully committed to me and I'm fully committed to her, but what does that look like? So that's kind of how it plays out a lot for me.
What is your internal dialogue like when you do show up that way?
When I don't show up?
The correct way, yeah.
When I don't show up the correct way? I mean, you know me, like my internal dialogue is like you're like, what are you doing? You're a moron. You're an idiot. You're an idiot. Like that. That's my favorite one. And then I think what happens, then a shame, because because one thing that you understand from the time that you grow up, especially when you grow up, again, a lot of times being a minority, what you realize is that you just don't represent yourself. You represent like that's just it. You represent the culture. You feel like it's all on your back, right? So when I don't show up that way, I feel like I'm not being a great representation for, even though that's false, but I feel like I'm not being a great representation for everybody I'm supposed to represent. So there's so much shame that actually comes with that. So then when I get shame, shame just is the gift that keeps on giving. And so then I start to back up even more. And then I think depression, things like that come on when I actually live that way.
Whenever that happens, inside, how do you recover from that?
Yeah, I think that it's the whole idea of where you're trying to do is just have it's the integration of both. So what I have to do is remind myself of actually truth, because in those moments of shame, everything's exasperated more, that I feel way worse. I feel like I didn't show up at all. I felt like, you go to those like extremes. So I have to remind myself it's okay. It's the whole thing of being curious and compassionate. Asking myself, okay, why didn't I do that? When I didn't come to this room, why didn't I show up? And then being compassionate to myself for so now it's okay. Just now we recover. So I think I've learned that now more over the years. Before I would just be in a shame cycle. Now I'm able to see it, recognize it, and turn it. And what I do in my brain is like, it's not over. Because I'm so entrenched in athletics for so long, I see it as a game. So if it's early on, if I'm like, when I realize I didn't show up and we're like 35 minutes into a meeting, then I'm like, but we got the rest of the day. I'm like, oh, dude, that's just the first 5 minutes of a game. I got the rest of the game. You know what I mean? Somebody plays bad in a game. I'm like, they're not, you play bad in a stretch, but at the end of the game, my plus minus still may be plus 25 because I just hooped the rest of the game. That's how I recover. I'm like, that's just a moment and kind of going from there. And that's a constant thing I'm trying to teach my kids. Like my son, as he plays, I'm constantly trying to teach him how to do it and kind of walk in that way.
And when you're telling yourself that you are supposed to show up in a certain way and then you don't do it, how do you know that you were supposed to show up in a certain way? Like, is that an internal conviction? Like, what does that feel like? What is that grid like for you?
Yeah, I think it all goes down to like values, right? It comes down to like your purpose statement, like your mission. So mine is, again, it's to help people write new rules, whatever space and place they find themselves. I believe the key to that for me is unlocking authenticity. And so because I believe it's authenticity, self-awareness, resilience, remain self-aware. So when I sit in a moment, and so here's an example. If I'm in a room with a bunch of millionaires and they lead, they're leading, publicly traded companies, whatever. Here's one way I do it. Do I laugh at their stupid jokes? Like, that's literally a way I do it. I'm like that, where I'm trying to or I'm trying to look for ways to insert myself into the conversation to kind of like whatever, or just agreeing with stuff, with everything they're saying. When I start to do that, I know I'm not authentically showing up as myself. That doesn't mean there's courtesy, whatever, but it's also in that moment, I'm trying to feel like, no, let me say something so I can be accepted. It says that when I walk in any room that I'm in, I really believe this. Like, in the depths of my soul, my backstage reality really is this. When I walk into any room, I don't think there's anybody in what I do. I don't think there's anybody on God's green earth better than me. Like, that's my real backstage reality. Now, you've been around me enough. It doesn't play out that way at times. But if I'm alone and I really believe there's very few people on this planet that can actually do what I do when I walk into a place. And that's what I'm trying to, because when you show up that way, you're not insecure. You're not even arrogant. You just know who you are. I've been in rooms with people like that. Like being in a room with Michael Jordan, playing on a floor with Michael Jordan, there wasn't like this arrogance about him. He knew he's the best player in the world. There was no one better than him. So when he walked around, he didn't have to try to be something. He didn't try to have to fit in. He walked into a room and the room kind of came to him because he knew who he was without him saying anything.
In the current cultural moment, when people talk about, being their authentic selves, that whole thing, a lot of the times what they'll mean is that they should be able to say whatever they want, do whatever they want, based on however they're filming.
Yep.
Do you agree with that? Absolutely
not. Like children and criminals do that. Like you just do what you feel. I'm like, you know how many times I feel like just slapping somebody? I'm sorry, it's a lot. But that doesn't give me the right to do it. And that's the world we've lived in, to where we think we can just do what we want to do, and that's authentically us. And it's not. That's a reaction. That doesn't mean that's the healthy part of actually who you are. And so I think that you have to learn to have self-control. That's why we say resilience to remain, because I think that a lot of times today, because things are shifting and changing and we have so many different inputs coming in from social to, news media, whatever you read, whatever you listen to on the college campus and what you're being taught in school, whatever, you just can fluctuate. And so if you just act on that stuff, man, it's a horrible way to live. I just see people live that way, and and honestly, they're freaking miserable. They're never the people who say they're the most authentic people. They legitimately are some of the most miserable people. Those who live that way. I'm just purely myself, and then I get around them. I'm like, dude, you have no idea who the hell you are. You are so distant. Because here's what it becomes: authenticity has become their on-stage performance. That's their on-stage performance now. I'm just me. I'm fully me. I'm da-da-da. But when you pull back, they're not like that. They're quiet. They're into anime. They whatever. And it's but they don't want to do that. But out here, they're this whole other thing. And I'm like, dude, just be that. And I get it, because for so long I was that way. I performed as this person trying to be this versus actually who I really was.
So is the goal for your on-stage presence and off-stage presence to be exactly the same?
You want them, let me say this, because that's a very good question. You want them to be as close as possible, but there are certain things that aren't. There's certain things that I can fully be away as far as with Wendy that I can't be with anyone else because of, here's the thing, we've made a commitment for life together. That's a safe place. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's a very safe place. I've got friendships that I feel like I can be really, like, that for them, but they could move out. You know what I'm saying? Like, our relationship, I feel like I can be 100, a lot with you, but there's certain places where I don't. And so I think that, like, there should be a couple people you should be able to be that with. But when I do come to the stage into real life, when I'm going to work and I'm in, in friendships, relationships, whatever, I think that the real parts of who you are. And what I mean by that is that, do the people around you actually know what you believe? Like, what you really believe? For a long time, honestly, I sit as a person who sits politically like center right. But the truth is that sometimes, man, I would get around certain people, and I get around people who sit left, and I can fit in there. I get around people who are right, I can fit in there. Now, what I do when I get into a thing, I'm like, I'll get with people who are on the right, and they start talking about, like, the left, and then I act like I'm fully left. I'm just going at them. If I see my friends who are on the left, I act fully right, because all those things are kind of there. And so I think just being able to bring the most part of it, but I think that you're not going to fully be 100%. But I think so many times we have such a gap. I think our gap for a lot of people, their on-stage performance and their backstage reality. If I were to just throw a random number out, I think on average, people, probably 10% of who they actually are ever really comes out.
How do you decipher the difference between what is unwise to maybe say or do versus just not doing it because it's uncomfortable?
I think in the end is actually, you have to think about it's always why. I love the quote by Ken Meyer when he talks about culture. He said, culture is not only what you make, but why you make it. I think but you can use that to what you say. Why are you saying it? Because it's not about not saying hard things. People who I admire, who I read in history, Martin Luther King said really hard things. We dress him up in today's culture, but he said really hard things. But why? It's because he wanted to see a people liberated. You can go through something, reading an autobiography of Steve Jobs right now. Steve said hard things. Sometimes they were not the right things to say because they were out of his own pain. Some things were really good for him to say because they actually helped move a company and move a world forward. So I think you have to ask yourself, why? Why are you saying this? Is it for the betterment of humanity, or are you just trying to air somebody out? Or you got so much frustration, anger, that it relieves you to say it in that moment. You feel good in the moment, but did it help anybody? And the way you do that is ask yourself why, and then look at the results. So why, as much as you're around me, and at times I say the craziest stuff sometimes to people, but I think when you look at the evidence of it, people change. It helps them get better. It may cause confrontation for a moment, but we get somewhere. I think you got to also look at the evidence, because if you're always just saying what you think and nothing ever changes, then at the end of the day, what you're saying is not from a right place, and what you're saying is not helpful. We, in our world today, with all the podcasts, again, we're doing one, with all the things people could say, people, they don't weigh what they say. People say the dumbest stuff. They just talk, and it makes no sense. It's not with wisdom at all. And that's the other thing too. Like, you have to communicate from stuff that you actually have processed. That's what makes, when you read writings of old and you're like, man, why do these people, even then you're like, I was reading something from about Seneca the other day, and, and it was just like, the words and the wisdom are so profound. Like, as we're recording this last week, a guy who's one of the most impactful people in my life, Tim Keller, passed away. And when you read his writings, the profound nature of what he said, because it was somebody who thought about it. Like, he just didn't say things. It's like he thought about it, he processed it, he ran it through the grid of real life. Then he brought it to the way that people could understand. That's why his words and the way he could phrase things. And here's the thing, I tell people, 15 years that he impacted the entire world, shaped, one of the most profound voices in all of Christianity. But his first public major book did not go to a New York Times until 2008. Then he wrote a New York Times bestseller in 2010. Died in 2023. 15 years, but a dude for almost until he's about 60. I think he's like 58. He just was just a faithful dude who just learned and processed stuff and was able to do it. But I think we live in a world where people just need to be a lot more quiet. You need to be quiet, and actually what you're professing and what you're saying needs to just be a little bit more seasoned and thoughtfully thought out.
What is your biggest, and you may have already shared this, fear when it comes to being more of yourself on stage?
That I always thought that I wasn't enough, and if I actually show up fully who I am, that the world's going to tell me what my greatest fear is, that I'm not enough. So I think sometimes I hold back because I'm still trying to be like, it's like double dutch. I'm like, let me put a little bit of myself out there. Let's see if they accept that. Let me put a little bit more. Let's see if they accept that. But if I fully go there, what if they tell me what my greatest fear is, that I'm actually not enough? And so what I have to do, so that's really like the thing. And so how I have to work through that is realizing even me thinking that is what's flawed. Because ultimately what I'm saying is that your opinion, what you think about me, your praise toward me, then speaks to actually who I really am. But I'm telling you, sometimes it's maybe the stuff that like you do, it doesn't, just because everyone doesn't accept it, doesn't mean it wasn't what's right. It was just, you may have been ahead of your time. There's so many people you look at, like they just were ahead of their time with what they were saying. And later people like, they praise them now. You know what I mean? You look at J.R. Tolkien and some of those guys, like J.R. Tolkien, like when he was writing that stuff, I mean, he was like known, but he wasn't what he was now. I mean, they literally just sold his, I mean, he did the movie, the Ring of Power. His like grandkids got $285 million for them just using part of his story. That dude wasn't that popular here, but he wrote in a different way that later was acceptable. So I think you just have to be willing to not look for the praise of people, because that's ultimately what you worship if you do that. So that's why I'm constantly trying to force myself to be more and more and more of myself. Whenever I have an opportunity to talk, whenever I'm showing up at work, whatever I'm doing, is to be that. Because I think if I'm the best version of that, it produces like the best results.
If you're talking to someone who is struggling with this, what is the biggest warning you would give them? And what is the biggest piece of encouragement?
Biggest warning is this, that if you're backstage, your on-stage performance, your backstage life stays separate, when you die, that'll be one of your biggest regrets. Like, I've sat with people, like I've literally sat in rooms when people die. And that's the stuff. It's not the accolades. It's not how many fights. It's not. It's like, man, like it's your family, stuff like that. But then it's like, but honestly, it's like, was I who I was designed to be, and did I bring that to the world? And I think that's the biggest thing, is that, you know, we all think about the moment, but you're thinking about and we don't know how much time we have. But can you say, like, if your day were to end today or tomorrow, that no, I was like, as much as I could be aware, I was that, you know what I'm saying? Into that process, so on and so forth. Yeah. I think the encouragement is this. It's like, man, the great thing about it, you can peel the layers. You can keep peeling the layers and actually become authentically who you were meant to be, but you need people to help you do it. You need to actually ask real hard questions. You know, stuff we've talked about. You need to figure out your sovereign themes, on and on. But I think there's just something about, I can tell you, somebody who had this on-stage performance and backstage reality that's actually now really switching, and has switched. You just have way more of a peace. There's just you're not as anxious about situations and things, because you just know, like, I'm doing the very best, because this is just me. Like, when I go talk to people, I'm like, this is just me. There's no way around it. Like, I'm okay with this. You know this, but like, I'm a verbal processor. I talk, I wear my emotions on my sleeve. That's just me. And I'm that. And I think the more you do it, the more peace you have, but I also think the more impact you actually make in people's lives. That's the part that I want to encourage people. Why you need to be more of your authentic self is not, it's your calling and purpose and all that has everything to do with you and nothing to do with you. Everything because it's yours, nothing because I believe any impactful purpose and calling should impact humanity. And so why I encourage people to go do that, because humanity needs that. And again, you're not responsible for how much of the world you get to change, but you are responsible for the world you do get. So for some people, Elon Musk, I mean, that's a big thing he's impacting. For some people, it may just be your family. It may just be your neighborhood. It may just be the business that you run. It may be the 10 employees that you oversee. But at the end of the day, you are responsible for making their life better and their world better. And the more you bring your backstage reality to your on-stage performance, the more impact you're actually going to have in their lives and the impact that'll have in their own family's life. Sweet. Well, guys, we appreciate you listening in. And again, we hope it's always helpful. Our biggest desire and our biggest heart here on the New Rules Pod is really to help you live this authentic life. We believe, as we said earlier, that authentic leaders create credible cultures that really do impact and change the world. And so keep going out there, keep writing new rules, keep living authentic life. Until next time, we'll see you. Keep writing new rules.